Good evening and welcome to the Shawsheen Placement Testing and Course Placement Live event. We are going to wait about 1 more minute before we get started, and then we'll breeze through this PowerPoint presentation. First off, we'd like to say congratulations and welcome. I know this is your first event that you are having with Shawsheen, and I'm sure you have many questions. Since this is the first event, we are only addressing placement testing and course placement. However, there will be plenty more events like this to address additional questions and to speak to all of the wonderful things that happen here at Shawsheen. Okay, so I'll give you about 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, so there seems to be a lot of people on. Welcome again. My name is Danica Johnston. You cannot see me right now, but I am the person behind this current slide's voice. My name is Danica Johnston, like I already said. I am the Director of Academics here at Shawsheen, and we will get started.
Hello and welcome. Congratulations, class of 2025. My name is Angel Hardy. I am the Shawsheen Science Department Chair, and I just want to welcome you to the RAM family here at Shawsheen, and I'm going to let Dr. Dave Marone, the Department Chair of Social Studies, take over from here.
Good evening. Congratulations and welcome to this live event focused on placement testing and course placement. During this presentation, we will review details related to placement testing. Presenters include Ms. Danica Johnston, Director of Academic Programs, Mr. Jeff McGrath, Mathematics Department Chair, Mr. Kevin Bloom, English Department Chair, Ms. Angel Hardy, Department Chair of Science and Physical Education. Yours truly, Dr. Dave Marone, Social Studies and Spanish Department Chair. Ms. Sheila Fitzpatrick, Support Services Department Chair. And behind the scenes, we also have Ms. Kristen Utston, Administrative Assistant, helping out with the process here. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please post them in the chat. Kristen's going to be helping us out with monitoring that. But we may not respond immediately, but we will go through them at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you may have. Without further ado, we will begin with Mr. Kevin Bloom, Chairman of English.
Thank you, Dr. Marone. And good evening and congratulations to the Shawsheen Tech class of 2025. Welcome to the Shawsheen family, as Ms. Hardy said. My plan is to briefly go over our freshman English program and the ELA placement test. On this slide, you can see if there's any questions about the English Language Arts placement test. You can direct them there, ELA placement at shawtech.org. So let me get into our course offerings. The English program is aligned with the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks with emphasis on its 5 standards. Our grade 9 curriculum centers on the theme of identity and self, exposing students to a variety of literary genres and informational text, as well as focus on writing argument, analysis, and narrative. We offer 6 grouping levels to ensure that our curriculum is accessible and paced appropriately for each individual student. 5 of the levels are college prep. 1 requires an IEP, a team recommendation, and parental consent. To speak about our students who require additional support, Next up will be Sheila Fitzpatrick from our Support Services Department, and I'll return a few minutes later to talk specifically about the placement test. Sheila.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. The 9,000 level English Language Arts courses are for students whose IEPs, for students who are on IEPs whose reading, writing, and overall literacy skills are significantly below grade level, and whose IEP team has determined that the student is in need of specially designed instruction. The course follows the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks with modifications for student learning needs. All of the courses are taught by certified special education teachers. Class sizes are small, usually 8 or fewer students per classroom. Additional support is provided by paraprofessionals and the speech-language pathologist. For students who require additional support on the placement testing, the placement testing is online, it is untimed, and the immersive reader, which is a text-to-speech software, is part of the program. You might ask, what if I normally have accommodations to access the curriculum? Well, the placement exam helps us to identify students who may need those accommodations at Shawsheen and would be placed appropriately. So when you're taking the test, some test taking strategies for students would be to have a fully charged computer with a charger nearby, have scrap paper and pencil available, be in a quiet place and alone so that there are no distractions, and make sure you don't use the calculator because we want to get an honest score for your math placement, for the math calculation skills, so that we can determine which level you'll be in. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. As I said, our course levels ensure that our curriculum is accessible and paced appropriately for each individual student's abilities. We have 3 certified consulting teachers of reading on staff as well, and our focused instruction model has produced identifiable and extraordinary student growth in both reading and writing. The levels reflect differentiation. That means differences in pace, rigor, teacher intervention, and student independence. We make sure that students can access materials we put in front of them. One of the common questions we'll get tonight is about summer reading. At Shawsheen Tech, we strongly encourage students to read independently over the summer. However, summer reading is only a requirement at the honors level. Now let's talk about the purpose of the placement test. The purpose of the English placement test is to determine the most appropriate freshman English level placement. We do this by evaluating reading comprehension, vocabulary, and writing skills. It is of the utmost importance, as Ms. Fitzpatrick said, that students complete the test without any assistance, either from a family member, the internet, the Google. We really want this to be a reflection of the student's ability. Last year, the pandemic forced us to administer the placement test remotely for the first time ever. And after a few weeks of school, we had numerous instances of students misplaced because they had assistance from others on the placement test. As a result, the schedules of these students had to be completely changed to more accurately reflect the student's true ability. Let me assure you that the placement test at Shawsheen is, placement at Shawsheen is reevaluated every spring. It's a very dynamic process that reflects each student's individual growth, that includes input from teacher, student, and parent guardian. Your student has been accepted at Shawsheen Tech. The results of this placement test does not change that at all, okay? Our goal is to make sure that your student starts his or her high school experience at the most appropriate level. Now, specifically the test. When you take the English placement test, it will be in a Microsoft Forms document. This program is very accessible and easy to navigate. I think with all of the remote learning, students have become very accustomed to this type of formatting. Students will begin by inputting biographical information and then move on to a reading comprehension test section with 9 reading selections and 54 multiple choice questions. That is then followed by a vocabulary section with 30 multiple choice questions. The final component is a writing prompt in response to a general knowledge prompt, and believe me, it will be a very relevant and accessible prompt for your students. As with all tests, we ask students to carefully read directions and take the necessary time to completely answer all questions. As Ms. Fitzpatrick said, the test is on time, so students may work at their own pace. The test also includes other common accommodations, such as a pre-writing graphic organizer for students who wish to make use of one, as well as the immersive reader program for read aloud capability. My advice to students after administering the placement test for many years is just to relax and do your best. Again, welcome to Shawsheen Tech. Just one other item, it's a little bit off topic, but before I turn the presentation over to Mr. McGrath, the chair of the math department, I just also want to let people know that the Summer at Shawsheen program is returning to in-person this summer. And we're going to be offering a variety of sports clinics, STEM classes, vocational technical courses, and other enrichment programs. You can go to the Shawsheen website, or there's a summer@shawtech.org email address to request more information. So just trying to make that little plug there. Now for math, turn it over to Mr. McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Similar to what Mr. Bloom and the other department chairs had said, I'd like to welcome the class of 2025 and congratulations on your acceptance into the RAM family. What you're going to see when it's my part of the presentation is a brief description of our math course levels, as well as an explanation of sort of the design and the layout of the placement test. You'll see at the top of the slide here below my name, the email address, which is mathplacement@shawtech.org. This email address is incredibly useful, specific to the math test, because we have some visuals and some graphics that appear in your testing. And if there are any technical issues with any of those images loading, please feel free to reach out to that email address, and so we can rectify that and give you the best possible testing experience. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the placement test components. So the first section, and you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there, is a screenshot of the actual form itself. We asked for biographical information, including the student's name, date of birth, town of residence, 8th grade middle school, 8th grade mathematics course, and then there are 3 science-related questions. It's incredibly useful to us to be able to know more about the 8th grade mathematics course, because some districts label things such as like 8th grade math. And the more specific that we know the title of the course, the better it's going to be for us to be able to get an idea of where the students are coming from, whether that be pre-algebra or some sort of like hybrid between the two. The specificity and the name of the course is very helpful for us to determine sort of where your son or daughter is coming from. This second slide here it shows you another image taken directly from the test, and this is the second section. We like to title this the content exposure / self-assessment. This section is not scored, but is incredibly informative to our teachers. The 9th grade teacher of record, whoever it is that is fortunate enough to have your son or daughter, is able to see this data after the test is taken. And again, it's not scored, but it allows the student to provide us with their own perceived strengths and weaknesses in these different topics that we test in our freshman placement test. And it also, especially in this remote and hybrid model that your child experienced, wherever their sending district is coming from, we know that some students were in person for a certain period of time or completely remote. And so the experience that they had meant maybe like a little bit less wide of a coverage of material and maybe not as deep as it normally would be in a regular school year in person. So the perceived strength that the student is able to identify is important for us, because then we can sort of judge the results of the placement test, but then also look back at what it is that the student felt they were either strong in or not so strong in. You'll also notice there's a category there that says hasn't seen before. Haven't seen before is again useful for us to know that maybe that's something that they didn't cover in their 8th grade experience. And again, as we're judging sort of their strength in that particular area, if they haven't seen it before, that's incredibly useful for us to know. The mathematics placement test component section 3 is going to be a computation section, and this is a nationally normed problem set. It has 20 questions, and this part is scored. And as Ms. Fitzpatrick outlined, it is incredibly important that we not use a calculator. This test is to be done without one because it will give us a better idea of what grade level that your child is operating at from a computation standpoint. And obviously the strength or weakness in this area will help inform us as to what sort of level and support they might need going forward. As Mr. Bloom outlined, we had some experience in our first go around with the remote testing last year. And similar to English, we found that there were a handful of students that used outside resources, including a calculator. And it only came to light after a couple of weeks, if not months into the school year, in which we identified that there were weaknesses that we had perceived before as strengths because of their test results. So we really encourage students to be completely honest in this section and to do this independent of a calculator, because again, your acceptance into Shawsheen is not affected by your test results, but the test results will do so much to inform us and make sure that we place your child at the correct level. And the final section is sort of like a hybrid section where we ask students a number of questions that are both 6 multiple choice option questions and also spaces for open responses. This is where those visuals I mentioned may appear. And so that's where, if we have any technical issues, to please reach out if you're unable to see said visuals. But in this multiple choice section, and you can see a question there with an example, there is a bulleted option as one of the multiple choice options that says, I haven't seen this before, or I do not remember it. We are encouraging educated guesses, but we don't want random guessing, because sometimes random guessing results in correct answers just completely out of luck. And then again, that will skew our results. So if the student is honest and identifies that something that they're looking at is something either that they don't remember or have never been exposed to, that again is incredibly useful for us and is way more accurate from the standpoint of level placement than it would be for them to randomly guess and happen to stumble upon a correct answer that way. So if they can be completely forthright and then choose answers that they think are educated guesses, excellent. But if it's something that they're random guessing on, we are definitely discouraging that. I apologize for the small font here, but these are the level descriptions for the freshman classes. Similar to English, we have a variety of levels. We don't have 6, but we do have the 4 options listed above, the 9312, which is our Algebra 1, which is offered with, as Ms. Fitzpatrick had stated, it requires a team meeting, an IEP, and parental consent to be considered for that placement. But above, you will see that our honors track is an honors geometry, and the subject matter in the non-honors track is Algebra 1 at 3 levels. Each one of those levels is differentiated based on pace, rigor, and also teacher support. Again, another visual I think that will sort of make that last slide make a little bit more sense. You see off to the left, we have grade 9, grade 10, and then 11 and 12 as we move across the screen. And this is just to give a perspective as to what class your son or daughter might place into as a freshman, and then what the course sequence looks like as you go across the screen across the 4 years that your child will be at Shawsheen. There are a lot of arrows and lines sort of connecting the different course offerings, and there's definitely more detail that I can get into. But I wanted to just put this out there so that parents who say, you know, my son in town might have honors Algebra 2 for freshmen, whereas you have honors geometry. I just wanted everyone to be able to visualize sort of the pathway and the sequence that would follow after that freshman placement, depending on where your son or daughter lands. And now I'm going to kick it over to Ms. Angel Hardy and back to Dr. Dave Marone to discuss the social studies and the science offerings.
Thanks, Jeff. I think Dr. Dave Marone was going to go first, though. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Jeff and Angel. I appreciate it. So with respect to placement in social studies, it's based on English scores on the placement test. And the reason why is because it's heavily based on literacy skills and writing, and it makes a lot of sense for us to have that be the skills we measure, because a lot of what we do in a history class involves the same skills. We have 3 levels in social studies: honors level, college prep, CP for short, and we have a 9,000 level, which involves the support services department for those that need extra support. Angel?
And science, our placement for freshmen is based on the English and a math component, because science would involve both. Our biology, which is what freshmen will be taking, is very vocabulary based. So the English is very strongly supported. And then we do get into the math because there are math components also in the course of biology. We have 4 levels, not as many as English or math, but we have an honors for freshmen, and then we have 2 levels of college prep. There's a level 2 and a level 3, and then we're followed by the 900 level, which is the support services that Sheila Fitzpatrick has spoken about. And if you have any more questions based on the science, I can always answer those afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's just a few important points we want you guys to remember about these placement exams. You've heard from all of the department chairs here at Shawsheen, and we just want to continue to reiterate that placement exams impact your placement in courses, not your acceptance to Shawsheen. All of you on this call are accepted to Shawsheen. Congratulations. We do these placement exams to make sure you are placed at the appropriate level here at Shawsheen and you're really set up for success. Our goal is to get all students through Shawsheen in 4 years and to graduation, and for the experience to be rich and for students to be challenged and also to enjoy the content that they are learning. So please just keep that in mind. Both placement exams do need to be taken on the same day. We are going to open up the exams this Saturday, May 1st, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Students can start the exam at any time during those hours, but once you start the exam, you can't close it out and go back in. So it's going to be important that students sort of sit for at least 1 full test at a time. You can take a break in between, say, the English and the math test. However, once you start it, you really need to commit to finishing it. Please do not get assistance with your placement exam. As Mr. Bloom said, this past year was the first year that placement exams were done online due to the pandemic. This fall, we had some major schedule changes that had to be made because students either got assistance with their exam or used calculators for the math portion, and they were misplaced in classes. That is what we're very much trying to avoid next year. We want students to come into the building, establish relationships with their teachers, and really start experiencing Shawsheen. If after a couple weeks we find out that a student is misplaced, the schedule changes can be significant enough where you're switching teachers, and it's just really disruptive to the overall learning environment. So please, again, this does not impact your placement in your acceptance to Shawsheen, but it does impact your placement in courses. The other thing we would like to mention is always do your best, and the first week of school, a modified in-person version will be given to students. And this is another situation. If the score is drastically different than that on the placement exam, then it could impact a student's schedule. Okay, so that concludes the formal portion of this presentation. We wanted to give you guys an outline of the expectations for what you will experience when taking these placement exams, and we can imagine that you have a lot of questions. The 2 points that we really want to reiterate are Mr. McGrath and Mr. Bloom have created 2 email addresses for troubleshooting purposes during these placement exams. So if on Saturday you're taking the exam and something happens, or you can't, an image doesn't show up, you can shoot an email to either Mr. McGrath or Mr. Bloom, and they will try to help you troubleshoot that day. You can always reach out to me, Danica Johnston, or Kristen Udston. So at this time, if you have any questions, you can please put them in the chat and we will answer them.
All right, it looks like we already are getting some questions here. The first question was, would you be able to use scrap paper on these tests?
Yes, you can definitely use scrap paper on the test.
Yes, that's what I thought. All right. The next question was about honors. Can a student decline the honors course if they are placed there?
Mr. Bloom or Mr. McGrath, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I can start with certainly in English. We can have a conversation about the rationale and the reasoning. We want to make sure that we're putting the student in the most appropriate placement. We often like to see, a student give it a shot and see how they're doing, but sometimes there's extenuating circumstances or situations, and again, it's not a one test fits all size. So we can engage in that conversation with parents and figure out what would be the best level.
Okay, great. I have another honors question. If a child has already been placed in honors classes for high school and for some reason doesn't score well on the placement tests, is there an option to move that student up or reassess?
Could you repeat that question one more time, Kristen?
Sure.
And I'll answer.
Yeah. This was a specific question about this person's daughter, but I have a idea that maybe some other parents might be questioning this as well. It says, if my daughter already placed in 3 honors classes for high school and for some reason doesn't score well on the placement test, is there an option to move her up or reassess?
Okay, that's a great question. So the placement exam is hopefully reflective of the student's ability, and I'm assuming that the placement for the high school courses was for their sending district. We would have to sort of cross that bridge when we got there, but we definitely look at students' transcripts, their current classes, and that's part of the reason that we collect that demographic information in the beginning as to what classes students are in currently, because in looking at the placement exam scores, like we said at the beginning, we have to look at the entire group of students holistically, and then we look at individual student data, which isn't just the raw score. So it would show that the student was already on the honors track, and if the score was very drastically different than what was expected, that would be something we could have a discussion with the family and, potentially figure out a solution.
Great, thank you. The next question, I'm going to put these two together, was students can choose to take the placement exams on either May 1st or May 8th, correct? So either date they have a choice. So
yes, that is correct.
And then a couple people are wondering, where exactly do they find the test?
So the test links will be emailed out to all accepted students on Saturday morning, each Saturday morning.
Okay. And I think the links are also, if I'm not mistaken, in the email that was, yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm overstepping. Never mind. Ignore that. Someone was wondering, will they find out their placement and what classes they're placed into before they get our schedules?
Prior to getting their schedules?
Yes.
There's a possibility that this might happen in English classes, so I'm going to let Kevin, about the summer reading piece, take that question.
So what we would do is we would determine which level students are in, and then there would be the process of going through the scheduling. So there's 2 steps to that. We hope to have identify which level by late June, early January. And then those students that are identified as honor students would receive both electronic and snail mail notification of honors with the summer reading. So that's how we would handle that.
Great. Thank you. Another question, will showing your work be mandatory if you do use scrap paper? And if you do you need to email that to somebody or just get rid of it?
I can take that one, Danica. So the showing of the work isn't required. It would be it's definitely advisable to do the scratch work on a separate piece of paper. In those open response parts of the math placement test, I've entered multiple variations of the same answer to make sure that, like, depending on how it's formatted, that you'll still get credit as long as it's equivalent or it's correct. But there isn't any formal requirement to, like, send in your work or verify that you've done the work yourself. It's really just on the honor system.
Right. Thank you. We have a question about foreign language. Someone is wondering, do they have to take a language at Shawsheen Tech?
So no, students are not required to take a language at Shawsheen Tech. Because we're a vocational high school, the opportunities to take those foreign languages classes do exist. We do offer Spanish 1 and 2, but that's the extent of the foreign language that we offer. We offer it, however, during the school day in the junior and senior year, and as well as after school in students' juniors and senior year and in the summer. So although it's not a requirement, if students are college bound, part of most colleges' entrance requirements are some sort of foreign language, and usually 2 years of that. So we do provide those opportunities for students, but it's certainly not a requirement.
Thank you. The next question, they were just wondering about how long does one of the tests usually take?
So the English test would take approximately anywhere between 60 to 120 minutes, 1 to 2 hours. Typically, if this was an in-person event, we would bring the students in at 8 and dismiss them usually around 12. Would be the typical event. Mr. McGrath, I don't want to overstep with math. You want to add?
Yes, I think ours would probably be around the hour mark as well. Some students, just looking at results from last year, took an hour and a half, some as short as 45 minutes, but it all depends. Computation section, the first 20 questions, depending on computation abilities, it sometimes is done as short as 15 minutes. Other students take as long as like 25 or 30. So that front section is definitely going to vary. And then the remaining questions, as I mentioned, because one of our bulleted multiple choice options is to respond that they don't remember or have never seen that information, there will be some students that towards the end of the test, as it becomes more difficult as it progresses, they might find that the material towards the end were concepts that they hadn't yet seen in their 8th grade experience. And then some of those honest answers will be, I've never seen this or do not remember, in which case then that end part of the test tends to be rather quick. So it all depends on the level of exposure that they've had in 8th grade. And so it can be from 45 minutes up to an hour and a half, somewhere in that range.
Great, thank you. And a next question. Somebody was just wondering if this presentation will be available via the link going forward, if they need to check back for anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, you can take that one, Kristen.
Sorry,
Sure.
I don't believe this exact link will work, but after this presentation is over, we should have a link ready up tomorrow on our website available for everyone. And I will also email it out to all incoming students for the class of 2025 as well. So you'll have that ready to go if you need to check back for anything. So yes, it'll definitely be available for you. And then moving right along, How long should students expect troubleshooting questions during the test to be answered? So if they sent something to either the English or math email, how quickly should they expect a response?
Mr. Bloom, I can go first here. I would say very quickly. In their past experience, just referencing last year, there were just a handful of students that had issues with like the graphics loading for the math test. Of the 320 some odd students that we had test, it was like fewer than 10, and it was the same question for some reason wasn't loading because the student was using Firefox versus Chrome or something like that. But we didn't have a great deal of like technical or troubleshooting issues. It went fairly seamlessly, and I think you know, with such a large number of students testing and such a small percentage encountering any kind of difficulty, I hope that that's not necessarily something we have to encounter. But if we do, I speak for myself, I would be very quick to respond. I'm monitoring the email throughout the day, both Saturdays, so that no one's left for hours on end waiting for a response.
And that would be same on the English, and I would say if you didn't hear a response from one, maybe email the other address as well. Mr. McGrath will be communicating with each other via text as well, because we could be maybe troubleshooting one issue and someone else is waiting for another response. So, but we do hope to be very prompt with those responses. I wouldn't start the test, you know, after 5 in the evening Saturday, though, you know, because it's going to shut off at 7 o'clock. There'll be a strict shut off window. So I would make sure you allow yourself enough time to finish prior to that 7 o'clock shut off time. That's something that'll be automated through the program.
Good point. Thank you. The next question, do we receive the results of the placement test or just the placements in the students' classes?
Again, it's specific to math. The students will receive their placement into the classes, and then we have had you know, parents who are concerned or have questions about placement and specifics as to how they were placed. And so a lot of individual parents in instances will reach out and then ask about you know, like, how are they placed in this class, and then I can give them a full breakdown and description as to how they stacked up against peers and how they scored in certain sections and percentiles and all that stuff. And that's available upon request, but they generally find out where they're placed first by their schedule, and then once they're in the classes within the first couple of weeks, they have a really good feel about, yes, this is the correct place for me. And I will speak for the math test. We've been working very hard to refine it so it's become more and more accurate, and we've had fewer and fewer placement changes because it's becoming more accurate. And I think it's a pretty useful tool. So they will be getting both information if they request it, and I'd be happy to share sort of the breakdown after the fact if that's something that parents are interested in.
And I just echo that with the English department. Same. We've added in the vocabulary to make it as comprehensive an assessment of a student's strengths with regard to ELA skills. So same thing. And you know, the teacher of record, freshman teacher of record, will have the data as well and be able to glean any information from that as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. My next question. If your child is currently on an IEP, do they automatically get placed in the classes with support?
Ms. Fitzpatrick, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So no, the student does not automatically get placed in there. We'll look at the current IEP to see what services are provided. And if the student is required to be in a C, on the C grid on the IEP, then we would make the recommendation for the student to be in the C grid at Shawsheen. But oftentimes students are in the co-taught class or the B grid service, and we have different levels of math at that level. So it might be a recommendation, and there's always the ability to have a conversation about that with the support services staff and the support services director. So the student is never just automatically placed in there. It's part of a team decision.
Great, thank you. This is a question about other classes that we have at Shawsheen. Someone was wondering if we have any specialist classes like music, art, etc. And
sure. So there are not a significant amount of electives like music and art at Shawsheen. However, during freshman year, freshmen get to do their exploratory where they visit anywhere from 12 to 15 shops. And in a lot of these shops, at DVC, for example, there's a lot of art and really you get to do really, really cool things in these shops and experience different things than students at comprehensive high schools. However, since the schedule for a student at Shawsheen is 1 week in their shop and the following week in academics, the time spent on academics is limited, and so most of the courses are more traditional core content courses. In junior and senior year, we have expanded some of our electives to offer the Spanish courses, to also offer psychology, some electives on financial literacy, government. There's a lot of science electives. So there are different types of electives, but not necessarily the music and arts.
okay, great, thank you. We're getting a handful of questions from parents concerned about kids who struggle with testing. So just like students could be placed in a higher level than they should be if they were to get help, what about kids who just don't test well, and then once they start school, you see that they might belong in a higher level class? Do they have the option to be moved up?
Yeah, certainly when students start at Shawsheen, the placement test is only one data point. We learn a lot about students when they come in September, and if a student is in a class and they're really misplaced, the teacher definitely can recognize that, or does recognize that, and makes a recommendation for the student to move. So just because your placement score wasn't what you expected it to be, if we find that students really have an ability beyond what they showed in the placement exam, we can certainly move them to a different level. There is, I mean, some students are really good at taking tests and some students struggle with assessments. And in high school, the competency determination by the state does require students to pass 3 MCAS exams: biology, math, and English. So testing is something that we work on with students and work on getting them the skills to be able to effectively test if they aren't currently at the level that they want to be or that they need to be prepared for those types of exams. So even if that's a difficulty now, it's something that we work on with all students at Shawsheen.
Great, thank you. The next question, can a student be considered for honors in science or social studies if they do not score high in ELA? Some students do not do as well in ELA, but have been recommended for honors in science and social studies.
Mr. Marone or Angel, would you like to take that one?
I could take the one for science. As I stated earlier, our biology course is very vocabulary based. So the ELA piece is quite important in the placement of a freshman in honors biology. As we get into the higher grades, junior and senior year, the math component for physics and chemistry become more important, and the ELA is a little bit lax. We open it up to more levels of ELA, but for freshman and sophomore year, the ELA is extremely important. Dave, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. For social studies, the ELA is, you know, one of our the ELA placement test is one of our guides for students coming in the early years at Shawsheen, mainly because history is very much, literacy based, a lot of reading comprehension, some writing assignments. As they get into the upperclassmen years, it sort of depends on what their track is and what their plans are after high school. Because they may want to take another math or may take a higher level science, and it may not allow for the ability to take a honors level history class.
Okay, great, thank you. I see a few questions here. Some people are wondering if they could take one test on May 1st, say the English test on May 1st, and then the math test the following week on May 8th.
We'd really prefer that the exams are taken at the same time. If there are extenuating circumstances that require you to do so, then that is a possibility, but it's really, we recommend getting it done in the one day so that it's not something looming. And we like for students to sort of like just sit down, commit to this, and then sort of go about enjoying the rest of their 8th grade year while we do the back end work and figuring out what the best placement is.
Great, thank you. Next question, did the tests have anything to do with the shops, or does it affect any of their shops placement?
That is a great question. No, these placement tests do not impact students' shop choice. That process is determined during freshman year. However, every student's engagement in their shop during their freshman year does influence their placement in shops. That's something that Mr. Dave Norkowitz will talk to incoming students about, is how they get placed into shops here at Shawsheen. But no, it does not have anything to do with this placement exam.
Great, thank you. I'm just trying to look through. I think a lot of these are questions that have been answered. I'm trying to see if I find anything different. Let's see. Trying to see, I'm looking through a lot of these. I'm trying to bring, also somebody had asked about the school calendar for next year, and I'm trying to grab it from our website to post on here as well, but I'm having trouble going between the two screens here.
Kristen, I noticed a question that I wanted to just so someone had asked if they can use their notes during the math placement test, and I would say please do not use your notes. The purpose of the test is to see like what it is that you've retained through your 8th grade and prior mathematics experiences. So if we're looking back at notes and looking at examples as to how to do it, similar to like if we were to watch like a Khan Academy video or a YouTube video or use a calculator. So all of those outside resources sort of skew whether or not you've really retained the information and you can apply it without having to refer back to those things. So please do not use your notes. Take the test as if it was a test administered in a class where, you know, the teacher just passed you out the paper and said, let's get to this. So please take the approach that we want to use no outside aids so that we can get an accurate look as to what it is that you've retained.
Great, thank you. Let me get back down to the spot that I was at. If anybody else sees anything that I may have missed here, feel free to jump on. I'm just trying to get back to scroll back to where I was. There's a lot of questions about schedules, when students will be receiving their schedules. Do we have a rough idea of when they would be getting those?
They will probably be out in early August. There's a lot of logistics that go into the schedule at Shawsheen, so students will receive it, I can say, sometime in August.
Okay.
Chris, I was just going to hop in. Someone asked, can my child use a read aloud extension for the English exam? The Microsoft Forms has the immersive reader, so when you click on that, that will provide the read aloud function for students who typically get that accommodation. And then there was another one that said if English is at 8 and math isn't until
Oh,
4. How would that work? That's not the case. You open up the test at some point between 7 and 7, and then you're able to take each of the tests. There is no set time frame for when they start. They start when you open them up. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. I see just a lot of duplicate questions. I'm going to get my way down. Someone was asking about gym classes. Do we have gym classes here? A couple of those. Yes, we still have gym classes at the school.
Yes, and students are required to take PE and health all 4 years at Shawsheen.
Yes. And then another foreign language question. Can you take a foreign language as a freshman? In which languages do we offer, or is it only as a junior and senior?
Correct. Currently, it is only as a junior or senior, and the only language that we offer as of now is Spanish. And so we offer Spanish 1 and Spanish 2.
Great, thank you.
I know there was a question that if someone doesn't pass 8th grade,
Yes.
does the acceptance roll over to the following year, or do students need to reapply again? Students do have to reapply if they do not pass 8th grade.
Yes. I have another quick question here I might direct this towards Ms. Fitzpatrick. I'm not sure if you know exactly this, but if a child is on an IEP, will there be a transition meeting before the schedules are sent out?
Hi, so this year we have a new director and he has been reaching out to the middle schools. So they are planning to do some of those transfer meetings. I think they're just going to all be online. They'll be virtual instead of having somebody from Shawsheen go to your child's middle school. So that is in the process. But he's also giving parents the option to just have a discussion with him. So once the testing is done, I know he has already had some conversations with some parents who've reached out, but there will absolutely be an opportunity to reach out and to meet with somebody from support services. But it might also be through your school. So there will be something. I'm not actually sure what the process will be. It's a little up in the air, but they are putting something in the works.
Great, thank you. I have another quick. Someone was just asking if a laptop would be better than a Chromebook to test on. I'm not sure if anyone has heard either way, if one was better than another or easier.
Kristen, I could take that. I don't, in my experience, it was less about necessarily the device they were using and more about like internet connection, the type of browser they're using. There was some issues with like the Firefox and then one person had issue with Chrome and somebody else in Safari. But a lot of it was related to like their internet connection or leaving the text accidentally and then trying to go back in and pick up where they left off and it having not saved data. So I don't think it really particularly matters the device so much as Ms. Fitzpatrick mentioned, like fully charging it, making sure that it's ready to the battery life will be sufficient for the testing. But we don't think a device is necessarily the issue.
Yes, and so students at Shawsheen will be getting devices next year. They are not Chromebooks, they're actually HP laptops. And all students at Shawsheen will be issued one when they come to Shawsheen. Shawsheen's actually a Microsoft school, so some of your sending districts are Google schools, but the platform is actually pretty user-friendly, and it's something that all staff is familiar with here at Shawsheen. Just in sort of the interest of time, we can imagine that you guys have several questions pertaining to everything, all things Shawsheen, because you just were accepted. You don't know what the program of studies entails. There's a lot of information to learn. There will be an orientation at some point following this. There will be other live events where you're going to learn a significant amount of information about Shawsheen. And we are unfortunately obligated to, we have another obligation, another live event to start in 4 minutes. So we can take maybe one more question and then we're going to wrap up. However, you may contact me, djohnston@shawtech.org, with any of these questions, and I will respond. And if they're really like relevant questions that weren't addressed tonight in regards to these placement tests, I'll send the responses out to the entire class of 2025. So Kristen, do we have one sort of like final question?
Let me see. I'm trying to find something that maybe would cover something for everyone that hasn't already been asked. If anybody else sees one that I'm completely missing, please feel free to shout that out too.
That's okay. This is probably a good ending point at this time. But again, we really appreciate you guys coming. If there are any issues with the exam, which there should not be, they were few and far between last year, please send concerns to the email addresses listed. Additionally, if you have questions regarding placement exams that weren't answered tonight, email myself. And we are so looking forward to meeting you all, and congratulations and welcome to the RAM family.